All right. Good morning, everyone. We are here for our weekly hypnosis talks with me, Jasiah, and Pete. And today we're going to talk about finding the right motivation. So go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, motivation is one of the, to me anyway, the biggest factors when it comes to our being successful. Um, it's one where I think about things in my own life that I don't enjoy doing. One of them is cleaning the kitchen, doing the dishes, right? The laundry. These are things we need to do, but we don't always want to do them, right? And whether it's that or a new habit, changing a belief, right? We need to have the right motivation to be successful. And so it got me thinking, and I'm going over a lot of my notes. Um, One of the first thing I've always hear from people when they want to make a change is they go, I need that external motivation, right? I need um, to clean the kitchen because my partner asked me to, right? Because I don't want to be in an argument with them, because I don't want to fight. And oh my God, if if I don't do it, they are just going to beat me down, right? That really external thing, nothing internal about me wants to do it. And will that work? Yes. However, it's not sustainable, right? It's a very short term thing. I've learned over the years that when we do things for other people or for external reasons, it will turn to resentment. And when we start resenting someone or something, we will go out of our way not to do it. You know? And so for me, whenever I hear someone, whether it's a potential client or a client or even myself or someone, my friends or family, and I hear them going, oh, I got to do this for this external reason, I will always tell them to stop. I will say, you got to find a better reason, because that is not going to work. I've seen it plenty of times. I've felt it plenty of times. Change it, right? And so the second kind that they typically go to is they try and guilt themselves into doing it, right? Um, they go, oh man, if I don't do this, like I'm a loser, and I don't want to be a loser, right? Or I know I should do it, but right? And the moment the word "but" comes in, yeah, we try and either guilt ourselves, or someone else will make us feel guilty, right? They'll go, but Pete, if you love me, wouldn't you want to do the dishes? Wouldn't you want to do the laundry and sweep? I do love you, but I don't want to do that, right? Guilt is again one of those motivators where short term, yeah, it will work, but for long term sustainability, it can't work. You know, um, and so when we think of those two things of external and guilt, don't use them for long term. Can they be a gas, right? Putting your foot to the pedal, can they get you jump started? 100%. But you got to find, I say, one of the next two to really hammer it in. Um, so the next one is probably my favorite one, but it's also the rarest. We have motivation because we want to do it. Yeah.
Right.
And for me, I find that comes when it, let's say, savings for a vacation, right? Where we get to go somewhere on a trip. I want to do that. So then it's easy for me to go, hey, I'm going to put this money aside every week, right? Because I know, like, oh, I want to do that. I'm a very competitive person. So with a lot of things, like whether it's the dishes or laundry, my want to do it is being competitive with myself. Like, I want to beat my best time. I want to be fast. I want to be right. Those are really the best motivations, because then it's not work, it's not a chore, it's fun, it's playful, you know. But the truth is, that is very rare for what we do, right? Not many people will go, I really want to change my lifestyle, right? They may not like their lifestyle, but it's hard to make it a game, especially when we're in that time where we go, it's do or die, right? If I don't make this change, I am going to die. It's hard to bring in that fun because there's still that pressure going on. Um, and that's where I found for most of us, especially as hypnotists or coaches out there, we have to find the motivation that's really built on our values of who we are as a person, right? So if we think of a lot of us that use my values, trust and honesty are my two biggest values that I ever have, right? I need to know I can trust someone and I'm going to be very honest with someone. Sometimes does that bite me in the butt? Yes, because sometimes people are like, you're being too honest, right? But that's who I am. That's what I value, right? And so for me, let's say it's doing the dishes or doing the laundry, is does this or how do I use this to build trust, to build honesty in my relationship, but more or less for me to live up to my values. So that could be, you know what? I told my wife I will do the dishes. And because I value trust and honesty, I am going to follow through on that, right? That becomes that deep intrinsic motivation that will make it so I never fail, you know? So when we think of all of the motivation out there, we have the two that are really sustainable. We have the two that could be the fuel on the fire to get it started, but we have to transition. Yeah. And so when you think of a change you want to make, right? Think of a time in the past where you did make a change. What motivation did you use? Right? What motivation did you use to get started? When it started to fade, what did you change it to? Right? Because that will help you begin to incorporate that same motivation into your everyday life, right? Where you get to go, oh yeah, I'm doing this. And then when we connect it really to our values, whether it's honesty or loyalty or friendship or confidence or whatever, right? Our values in life, we will always, I say almost always, live up to our values, right? Because when we don't, we feel bad inside. We go, man, like I let myself down. Never mind everyone else. I let myself down because I didn't live up to my values, you know? And so you start taking all of that and you start going, okay, how can I use this to begin to change my behaviors? How do I use this when a time is difficult, right? Because we would love to say, at least I know I would love to say, change is easy, right? It's one of those things you go, oh, done, change made. But the truth is, we all hit difficult moments, right? We all hit moments where that motivation isn't there. And those are the times where we really need to dig deep, right? To find those values, to go, I want to live up to my values. I want to live up to my lifestyle. You know, that'll help you still do it when it's not after you went to a Tony Robbins seminar and you're all amped and jacked and excited and you have the energy flowing through you, right? But it's funny. Like I know, kind of I guess side topic now. I know people who have gone to the Tony Robbins seminars and they're jacked, they're so hyped, and then they come back to their everyday life, and that hype and that motivation fades, you know, because they didn't bring it into their own values and their own life. They were just going off the energy of everyone around them, you know. And so we got to think about that. When we're around the right people, it's easy to have the motivation. But how do we have the motivation when we're alone, when the wrong people are around us, right? Because that's going to happen more often than we probably know about. And so when we can have that deep why and the value of why we're doing what we're doing, how we're going to change our behavior, that's when it happens. But it all comes from within, you know? And we have to be able to believe in ourselves that we can do it. Right. I know for myself, there's been plenty of times where I will go, I did it then, but can I do it now? And I have to remember and remind myself and remind my clients, because I did it then, I can do it now. And carrying that competence or that confidence with me along this journey is super important for that complete change where it becomes automatic, that new behavior, right? That new ability, because it's not going to be automatic on day 1, day 2, day 5, but we have to keep doing it because eventually it will be.
Well, and also it's, it reminds me of what you said last week, which is like, being a good friend to yourself. So, it's like you're going, well, I did it before, but I don't know if I could do it again. And that good friend goes, you've done it before, you can do it again. And more often than not, we need those reminders. We're humans, we're a community, based beings. And so just to be reminded and to remind the cells, right? I mean, everyone gets tired, everyone gets broken down. Cells get tired, they get broken down, but they can be remotivated, Yeah. So I also wanted to just mention one of the motivations that you didn't say here, but I'm curious if it might be in one of these categories, which is fear.
I would put that in the category of the guilt one, fear and guilt.
Okay.
Right.
I was thinking external. So like, what would be the difference, do you think, between external and guilt?
So guilt can come from both internal and external. So I guess, relatively fear too can be external fear of someone yelling at you, right? That in the internal is, oh man, I'm afraid I'm going to get punished by not doing this. And it's one where in general, I'm against people using fear as a motivator, only because it burns out really quickly.
Yeah, I don't actually mean, yeah, I understand. I don't mean using it. I mean noticing when it's used, right? Because sometimes it's fear or uncomfortableness that motivates a person more than these positive qualities. So when there's somebody who notices, well, when was the time that I was motivated to do this? It was when I was so uncomfortable I couldn't stand it anymore. It's when I was so scared I didn't have another choice, right? It wasn't when I couldn't get there with the values and wanting it that bad, or connecting it to my values. It in my past, this is what's motivated me. What would you tell someone for that?
So would you say like that type of fear is, your back is against the wall and the only way to go is forward, right? If you like I forget, I think it was the Chinese, one of their wars where they burned the ships, right? With that whole expression of burn the ships, meaning there's no going back, right? That type of fear pushing you forward, right? That could be helpful, because realistically, what that's saying is, I don't like what's behind me, right? Because what's behind me doesn't fit into my dream, my values of who I want to be. We may not recognize what those values necessarily are, but we know we can't go back, right? Because what's back is more painful than what's forward.
Well, what I hear there also is, you don't just leave it at fear. You go, what kind of fear is it? And you start to break down the monster, this big, monster of fear. It's like, hey, don't assume that you know what that fear is, especially what that fear is for someone else. And when you start asking it questions, all of a sudden it's not the same. It starts to be defined and redefined and redefined, right?
Yeah.
Which then you might end up finding it flows into all these other different categories.
Yeah. I find with fear, like, so we'll take the fear of failure and the fear of success, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, the result is the same, right? we don't move forward in whatever venture we're trying to move forward in. Is it because we're afraid to succeed, or is it because we're afraid to fail?
Right.
You know, it's not, like you said, until we can dive deep that we get to go, oh, it is the fear of success, right? Because in general, most people are like, no, you're afraid to fail, right? And that's the go-to answer, because they're so similar in their results, but the nature of them is very different, right? And so if you go into that fear going, I'm afraid to fail, and nothing changes, that might not be the right fear, right? And you go, well, maybe I'm afraid to succeed. Well, why wouldn't I want to succeed? And it's like, well, I have this belief that if I do succeed, it's going to change me as a person, right? Now, that changing me as a person doesn't meet my value of being kind, right? Because to be in order to succeed, maybe I got to stab someone in the back, right? I got to step on toes. That doesn't meet my value of being a good person. And so what it becomes then at that point is, well, do I either A, change my value to be the person who's okay with stabbing someone in the back, which I hope no one does, or you go, how do I take my value of being a good person and apply it to succeeding, right? Because when you apply that to succeeding, the fear will change with it, going, oh, so I can be successful and be kind. Oh, I can be successful and give back to the community. I don't have to be selfish. It'll find those ways, because that fear isn't real. It's just a perceived belief in our mind of how we view being successful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's, something to really dive into and investigate. What are your beliefs? What are your values? I don't know what could one person do when they're trying to investigate what their motivation is, or when they find what has motivated in the past. What's a good way to kind of um, what's the word? I always forget the word when we're, I'm forgetting,
Like
but
deconstruct.
yeah, deconstruct. There's another word, like condition. If we want to like deconstruct and then decondition some of these like beliefs and patterns that are holding us back, like what are some tips? Like maybe for the last few minutes of the session, we could just give some of those tips.
Yeah. So understand, one of the best tips you can do is write down all the values of who you are as a person, right? Write them out on paper so you can look at them, because a lot of times we don't really think of our values of who we are, right? But understand, like when we first start, so they call it the pre-contemplative state, right? Where our reasons not to change are higher than our reasons to change. And when it's like that, it's almost impossible for us to change. We're going to be resistant. We're going to fight it, right? We're going to just be like, this is what I am, right? This is who I am. But when you can start to bring in your values to go, how do I use my values for change, right? How is my life I'm living now not matching my values? You become into the contemplation phase, which is like really preparing to change, right? You're not changing yet, right? It's not an overnight process, right? I think that's one I hear an awful lot from my clients. I want to be overnight, right? It's beginning to get small wins for a long-term success. But once you kind of bring in your values and you recognize them for how, not really why, but how they will match whatever change you're going for, right? How do you apply loyalty to a change to quit smoking? How do you apply being a good role model to quitting smoking? How do you apply, trust to living and eating healthy, right? Sometimes you got to get creative, but when you can match it to the new behavior, it's going to make it a lot easier, because then you get to prepare and then you start making these small changes, right? Maybe when it comes to weight loss, it's not going, well, I'm going to eat, McDonald's 3 meals a day to no meals. it could be simple of I'm going to have McDonald's for 2 meals, and then I will have a salad for one of those meals. Do that for a week or two. Then it's, well, now I'm going to replace a second meal with maybe a healthier option, right? And then that for a couple of weeks, and then it's the third meal, right? We have to be able to go and see our values, to recognize them, to apply them, then enjoy them, right? Enjoy them playing out, because that's what makes it automatic. So I would say really think about your values of who you are as a person, what you would, stand for no matter what happened, and then see how you can apply it to your change you're working on.
And then enjoy it. I
And
feel
then
like,
enjoy
that is the icing on the cake, but it's also really like the core, of so much. Is like, when you said that, it just lit me up with this sense of like, you figure out what your values are, you figure out what baby steps you can take to get there, and then enjoy it. Like, and if you enjoy it, you're gonna want to do more. And if you notice that throughout your day you're having no joy, then that might be a dissonance, and that might be an unmatched frequency to, um, your value system and your daily life. And so noticing what was joyful,
Yeah.
and it seems like a good barometer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you're not enjoying it, it's not hitting one of the values right, or multiple values, right?
Right.
And being able to just go, okay, it's not that it's not going to work. It's not enjoyable. So
Right.
what can I do to add more enjoyableness to it?
Right. Or just enjoy the process.
Yeah, it's one where I know we're close on time, but Bob Proctor used to talk about how you have an idea, you put it into theory, and the theory becomes action, right? And then it becomes a new idea once that action is in concrete, right? So once it's kind of in maintenance phase, it becomes a better idea. But he always talks about how it'll go from theory to action to theory to action to theory to action before it goes to new idea. Because we're not designed to go, that's it, done. We're designed to go, oh, this could be it. Let's try it out. Oh, that was actually pretty good, but I didn't enjoy this part. So how do I change that part? Right. And then we go back into theory and we're changing it. We put it back into action until it's really enjoyable.
Right.
Then we get to sustain it. We get to maintain it, go, this is great. And then naturally our mind goes, well, how do we make this better? Right. What's the next stage? What's the next evolution?
And I think, what it also does when you say that is it makes you the contributor of your life. And it, that's the scientific way, that's the magician's way, that's the alchemist's way, is, fine tuning, like fine tuning, and finding that joy in it, right?
Yeah.
Which sometimes is easier said than done, but sometimes is like easier than you might think, I would say.
The times it's been hard for me is when I have a certain expectation of what I want it to be,
Yeah.
and it doesn't hit that.
Right.
When I can let go of that and just enjoy the process of discovery, right? Of finding out what really, makes me excited, right? What really works for me. When I get involved in just the process and I forget the result, that's when it becomes a lot easier and more enjoyable.
Yeah.
But when I'm in it going, it has to work like this, and it doesn't, that's when I no longer enjoy it. But that's a sign to me going, well, I had an expectation. Let's get rid of that and try it again.
Well, that's trust and faith. And that's, books have been written about that for millennia. And that's been a human struggle for a long time. But I think we should definitely, continue on that, because a lot of us are run or held back with fear. And, I'm sure there's a lot of opposing, ways to go from fear. One of them would be trust and hope and faith. And those are definitely higher frequencies, and they're definitely more light and lifting to be able to get you,
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
might be able to, you may or may not be able to do everything you want just with that, but it certainly is a great wind, like air in your wind in your sails.
yeah, yeah. Napoleon Hill says the opposite of fear is faith. So
Mhm.
you can either live in fear or you can live in faith. You can't live in both.
Yeah.
So when you choose one, the outcome will reflect that choice.
Yeah. That's great. Well, let's definitely end it there. That's a great one. I want to um, well, I was going to do a banner, but we'll save it for next time and keep going. So thank you again to you, Pete, for showing up every week. And always, anyone who's listening, reach out to us with any questions. And we will see y'all next week. So thanks so much. Ciao.
Bye.